Hi, I'm Ronald the Rules Lawyer, and we're going to make Abserd in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Now, who is Abserd? Well, it's a joke skit by Puffin Forest, a YouTube creator, that has a character take one level of every class in Dungeons & Dragons. Now, people should watch it. He has a ridiculous backstory, and of course, D&D players know you're not going to make a very effective character if you take one level in every class. And here's a little clip.
How does the character play? It doesn't. I mean, seriously, I'm an archer that can't shoot, a fighter who can't fight, a healer who can't heal, a wizard who can't cast a spell. Does that sound like a broken character to you?
Meanwhile, Pathfinder 2nd Edition claims to be the king of character customization. Make anything you want. There's so many options. But can it handle taking Abserd? Can you take a level in every class? And also, is it a viable character? In this experiment, I'll take as many classes as possible, and I'll answer the first question, no. You cannot dip into every single class in the game. First of all, there's more classes in Pathfinder, but also that's not how multiclassing works in Pathfinder, and I say multiclassing in quotes, and I'll explain soon why I do that. But is it viable? And I pose two questions in this experiment. First, are you able to make Abserd, and is it still viable? In other words, do you still have a viable, strong character that doesn't fall behind the rest of the party and become useless? Second, if the answer is yes, then do your choices matter in Pathfinder? Some detractors of Pathfinder say that Pathfinder is so balanced that it makes choices in your character meaningless. Now, unfortunately, I can only cover the first couple of levels today. I am a victim of my own detail-orientedness, and I didn't want to just make a build video. People who know my channel know that's not me. I like to show and see how builds play in action in demonstration combats. So I'm not jumping to level 20 and saying what I got in this video. The joy is in the journey. We're gonna go slowly, and if there's interest in this video and this series I hope to do, I will do follow-up videos and eventually make it to level 20. Given how slowly I'm going to be going about this and that I'm going to be doing combat demonstrations, I have other goals with this video series. I hope to showcase Pathfinder's deep character customization, show how build choices affect your in-combat choices, and see how combat evolves from low levels to high levels. So I will kind of apologize in advance for going through this slowly. Anyway, if I jump to level 20, it wouldn't be possible to go over everything in Abserd's character, given how many things you gain as you level up in Pathfinder. Now, who am I? I am Ronald, the Rules Lawyer. I am a lawyer who has been running tabletop role-playing games since 2010, later in my life, and I ran an after-school, middle-school tabletop role-playing game class where we did Pathfinder, Starfinder, and D&D 5th Edition. Pathfinder 2e is my preferred system, but I cover other systems. Like and subscribe. Also, support my Patreon, where I now will be starting to put bonus content. I'll be putting my character sheets for Abserd up there. I also plan to post my initial plan for this video series that already goes up to level 20 on the Patreon. I actually wrote it out in January of this year, 2023. Other events intervened and I had to do other videos. There's also going to be a second bonus combat with Abserd on my Patreon, as well as other exclusive videos, including me running Pathfinder 2e for D&D YouTubers. Okay, so before making Abserd, it's necessary first to talk about how Pathfinder does multiclassing, in quotes. In Pathfinder, you have only one class, unlike in 3rd edition and 5th edition D&D and 1st edition Pathfinder. I actually put out a 2-part video as part of my law school series going into character creation and going deep into why I think multiclassing had to die for characters to thrive. Links in the video description. But in Pathfinder, you only have one class, and Abserd is going to be a rogue, and I'll explain that choice later. As a rogue, as you go up from level 1 to 20, you get a number of class features that advance automatically. You get your sneak attack advances from 1d6 to 4d6. You get a number of class features that improve your attacks and give you new maneuvers, let's call them. And meanwhile, you get a class feat at every even-numbered level. Those class feats give you new abilities, new options to do as a rogue. But you can forego a rogue feat to take an archetype feat. Archetypes, think of them as themes. Some archetypes are multi-class archetypes and give you aspects of another class. Here on the screen is the initial dedication feat for the rogue archetype. As you can see, it gives you certain things and does not give you everything that a rogue who starts at level 1 as a rogue gets. This, meanwhile, also unlocks further feats in the rogue archetype. You can think of archetypes also as feat trees. You must take 3 feats from one archetype before you move on to another. So you can kind of see already that if you take 10 more rogue feats, or if you take 0 more rogue feats and instead take archetype feats, you still get all of these other things rogues get. Those things are not affected. These features are fixed, guaranteed, and meanwhile, you're adding your level to all of your stats. Some of these features include improvements to your reflex saving throws, for example, and so your mathematical progression is fixed. If Abserd were a wizard, he would still get 10th rank wizard spell slots, even if he were to take 10 archetype feats in rogue. Since all of your class features are fixed, you can think of your class feats as ribbon abilities for your class. So what are the parameters for our experiment making Abserd? First, I will do as many classes as possible within the limits of the system, since you have to take 3 archetype feats in one archetype before we can move on to the next. I will also try to make Abserd a viable character. Our experiment, after all, is to find out whether you can make Abserd and make him viable. I will also start with the core 4, the classic 4 of fighter, cleric, wizard, and rogue, before moving on to other classes. And as you can tell, I'm only going to do multi-class archetypes. There are other archetypes not keyed to a certain class, things like Beastmaster, that lets you have an animal companion, which any other class can take. Things like Wrestler or Poisoner. That's a whole other world of character customization that is possible that we will not touch on. We already have enough on our plate. Also, lastly, and very importantly, we will be using the very popular free archetype variant that I believe the majority of tables, at least those that post on the Pathfinder 2e subreddit, use, that give you a bonus feat every even number level that can only be used on an archetype. Why? Because it lets us get as many archetypes as possible, and we want to make it as absurd as possible, so we need to do it. If we weren't using it, we would only be able to get 4 archetypes. So let's start at the beginning, at level 1. It'll be a long journey, though I hope you will enjoy watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. So let's get started. Abserd is going to be a rogue.
And after I left them, I was on the streets for a while, and I met a guy who taught me the secret to being a rogue.
Now, why I've chosen rogue, I'll get to when I get to that part of character creation. You start with your ancestry first, and for him, he's going to be a human. You also get a heritage, which is kind of like what D&D would call a subrace. And in Pathfinder, there are versatile heritages that let you take on aspects of other ancestries. And one of them is to be part elf, or Ayuvaran, formerly known as half-elf. It gives him low light vision and also unlocks the ancestry feats for elf and Ayuvaran. And for his first level ancestry feat, he's actually going to choose from the human list and take natural ambition, a human feat that gives you a bonus class feat. Next is his background, which can reflect his upbringing or his profession, and he's going to be a criminal. He is going to be a rogue, after all, as his one class, and he's also going to be on the lam, which makes sense for Abserd because he's going to be journeying across the landscape and encountering guilds and other organizations that let him take up abilities of other classes. A background gives you 2 skills, and his will be stealth and underworld lore, and a skill feat, and his will be experienced smuggler, which will make it easier for him to conceal items and sneak them past authorities. Next is his class, and he's going to choose rogue. Now, why do I choose rogue? First of all, it has to be one of the core 4. Also, I did not want to pick a spellcaster because the spellcaster, even if they don't choose any more class feats and just choose archetypes, they're going to get all of their spell slots up through 10th rank. And so for many people, that will already answer the question for them, is Abserd viable? And I wanted to make it harder for us to do that and strain the system. So I chose a non-spellcasting class. And another reason is that rogues are multi-talented by nature, and that fits his theme. he gets to get lots of skills and skill feats, and we also get to show off that part of the system. Meanwhile, during all of these steps, he was building up his attributes, and we have his strength of +1, dexterity +4, constitution +0, intelligence +2, wisdom +1, and charisma +1. It should be no surprise that he has maxed out his dexterity as a rogue, but as you can see, I have spread the boosts out among the other attributes to set up for taking other multi-class archetypes. You need to have a +2 at least in 1 or 2 attributes in order to take any multi-class archetype. And it's worth pointing out now that Abserd in D&D is kind of not really possible if you are using point buy, and you'd have to be very lucky in rolling your stats because you need to have a 14 in pretty much every ability score except Constitution. Whereas in Pathfinder 2e, because it's generous with attribute boosts, you get to increase 4 different attributes every 5 levels, you can kind of do it with the core character building rules. Okay, so we now move on to what he gets from being a rogue. First, you get sneak attack. You get to do an extra 1d6 precision damage when you hit a foe that is off guard. There are many ways to make a foe off guard, and this is if you do it with an agile or finesse weapon, or a ranged weapon, but if it's a thrown weapon, it has to be agile or finesse. Next is surprise attack. In Pathfinder 2e, you can sometimes roll a skill for your initiative roll that is not perception, which is technically not a skill either. If you roll stealth or deception for initiative and doing something appropriate to one of those 2 skills, surprise attack means that every foe who has not acted yet is off guard to you. So this is good for obvious reasons. Let you do your sneak attack. So Abserd is going to be skulking in the shadows, or will have an advantage if he starts a fight in the middle of a conversation. Next is he is trained in light armor or unarmored defense, and he's trained with simple and martial weapons. Now, what does trained mean? He gets to add his level +2 to his ability score modifier to determine attacks, or in the case of armor, his armor class. Abserd will also be an expert in perception, reflex, and will saving throws. Next is what you might want to call a subclass, his big choice as a rogue. There are several. One of them is a ruffian, which lets you bully people and actually make strength your key ability score. That's a fun one. But he's going to choose to be a classic thief. The thief's advantage is that he gets to add his dexterity modifier to his damage when he attacks with a finesse melee weapon. You cannot do that by default in Pathfinder 2e, and the thief is the only rogue and also the only subclass in the game that can do this. Next is his class feat, but he gets 2 because of his natural ambition feat. First, Abserd will be a trap finder. He will get a bonus to finding traps and avoiding traps, but also if he's focused on something different than searching for traps in exploration, he will still get a free check to search for traps. His bonus feat will be tumble behind. In Pathfinder, you can try to go through an enemy space using your acrobatics skill, and when he does so, that enemy is off guard to his next attack. So it's a great way to set up that sexy sneak attack damage. Next, he gets skills, and boy does he get a lot of skills. He got 2 from his background, which is normal. And also, being a rogue, he gets stealth for free, and because he already had stealth, that turns into a free skill. He gets thievery from his thief racket, and he gets 7 more skills plus his intelligence bonus of 2. So that means he has 13 skills at level 1. Rogues are the best at skills in the game. And on that same theme, every other class has only their skill feat from their background at level 1, and get another at every even-numbered level. But rogues get a skill feat at every level in the game, including level 1. And so his skill feat is going to be Intimidating Glare. Other people need to talk to enemies and be understood by them to have a fair chance of making them scared, but Abserd can just look at them. For equipment, he's going to get the standard gear, including thieves' tools, and he's also going to dual wield. He's going to wield a rapier and a dagger. You can see Abserd's level 1 character sheet that I made in Hero Lab on my Patreon if you support it. Now, what happens when he levels up? Let's not do that yet, actually. Let's do a combat demonstration. Let's see how Abserd performs in a combat now. Now, why make a level 1 combat demonstration? Abserd has not branched out of his base class yet. Well, one, I thought it'd be a good baseline so that we have something to compare to, but also there's just a lot of things you can do in Pathfinder combat. It's good to establish the variety of things he can do as a rogue because his build choices later will affect his play in combat. Abserd has made some friends, a fighter, cleric, and wizard, and they have ventured into this underground cave complex to find and raid an evil underground temple. They see this ogre up ahead and a giant spider on the ceiling, and Abserd whispers to them and says, "Hey, let me lead the way. Follow me, don't make a noise." So he does that, and they each make individual stealth rolls, which does give them away to the enemy. The ogre pretends not to hear. They go ahead and reach their position. Of course, the entire time Abserd is simultaneously looking for traps. The ogre got ready to attack them, and after she notices that they're not getting out of their little hiding space, she decides to start walking forward. And it's at this point the party decides to spring their attack. They all roll initiative, and the party rolls stealth for initiative. Abserd gets to go first. He has a good stealth after all, and he got a +2 bonus from cover. In Pathfinder, you get 3 actions, and moving up to your speed is an action. He's going to move up here into this spot and attack the ogre with his rapier. His rapier has an attack of +7, and the ogre has a 17 armor class. However, he has surprise attack, and the ogre has not acted yet, so the ogre is off guard and has only an AC of 15. Abserd strikes with his rapier. And he rolls an 18 and total 25, and that is 10 bigger than the ogre's armor class, so that's a critical hit in Pathfinder 2e. That means his damage is doubled, and he had sneak attack, so he actually gets to roll his rapier d6 and sneak attack d6, add his dexterity to damage, and that all doubles. But also, the rapier has the deadly d8 trait. That means that when you critically hit, after you double the damage, you add another d8 to the damage. So this is going to do a lot. And it's going to do 25 damage to the ogre warrior. That's half of her health. Ogres are level 3 creatures. They're like a boss creature for a level 1 party. Fighters are more accurate, but Abserd is deadlier with his crits. And we're not done. He has 3 actions. He has 1 more action. He can attack with the same weapon multiple times over the course of his turn. However, each subsequent attack will be less accurate, so his rapier only has a +2 bonus. However, his offhand weapon, the dagger, is a little weaker than a rapier, but it's an agile weapon. It has a smaller multiple attack bonus, and it's going to be more accurate right now. It has a +3. Now, if you're playing in person, you'll want to write down these bonuses ahead of time. He's thinking of stabbing the ogre with a dagger, which is still off guard to him, or maybe he wants to throw it at the spider on the ceiling. And the spider is off guard also, since it hasn't acted yet. But he doesn't want to do that. He's not in a safe position right now. Another issue is that he does not get his dex bonus to damage throwing a weapon, something to do for emergencies. So what he's going to do is stride away. Remember, his constitution is only +0. The ogre does not respond. Most enemies don't have opportunity attacks. And by making distance, the ogre now has to spend an action walking up to Abserd. The rules reward you for skirmishing in combat, basically, which any character can do in this game, but Abserd kind of has an incentive to do it more. It's only his first attack that's likely to crit after all. Before his next turn, the fighter comes up, raises his shield, and tries to attack the ogre. He hits it and draws its attention. The ogre goes all in against the fighter and lands a critical hit. 27 damage. The fighter can't block enough of that to prevent a knockout, so he's knocked out. The ogre then stalks over to Abserd and tries to make an attack against him. And he is gonna hit! Ooh, 13 damage. Abserd's almost out. The cleric heals the fighter and moves forward. The spider drops down from the ceiling and attacks the cleric and poisons the cleric and makes her off guard as well with the poison. The wizard casts Force Barrage, formerly known as Magic Missile, spending 3 actions and shooting 3 missiles against the spider. Abserd is next. What he's gonna do is try to tumble through the ogre to use his tumble behind feat and make it off balance. He rolls acrobatics. He needs to beat a 16, and he succeeds. So it's now off guard to his next attack, and now he attacks with his rapier. And that is a hit, and that is gonna do sneak attack damage. 12 damage to the ogre. He is a hero. He could do a killing blow with his dagger, but he's not that heroic. He's gonna walk around and go behind this rock. At higher levels, he'll have more options open up to him as he gets more abilities, but there are other things that have not happened yet that I'm going to demonstrate really quickly that any character can do, and which Abserd may want to do, because attacking 2-3 times isn't always good because you have that penalty to your accuracy. Basically, there are other ways for Abserd to make an enemy off guard to him. And he, more than anyone else, wants to set up an alpha strike because he can get that sneak attack damage if they're off guard, and with his rapier, if he can get a critical hit, he gets that juicy, deadly D8 damage. Setting someone up to be off guard can turn a regular hit doing average 7.5 damage to a critical hit with his rapier with sneak attack doing 26.5 damage. So what if the party delays and waits for the ogre to approach? Well, the ogre goes up and attacks the fighter and severely wounds him. Fighter jumps back in and goes to the opposite side of the ogre and makes an attack. This sets up a flank. If you're standing on opposite sides of a foe, that foe is off guard to your melee attacks. Abserd can walk up and make 2 attacks with his weapons, and he can score a sneak attack 2 times. Let's say the ogre started far away and spent her whole turn going up to here. He's been hiding, but he can't use surprise attack on her because she has acted already. He can sneak forward at half speed to a point of cover, let's say the corner of this wall, and attack from behind it. He'll have to roll stealth to stay hidden. Then she would be off guard to this attack. You have to have some cover or concealment, let's say dim light or darkness, and the ogre can't see well in that area. He can also hide behind cover if it's reasonable, at melee or from range, which makes him hidden and the ogre off guard. Also, Abserd has many skills, one of them being deception. He can do the feint action against the ogre warrior to create an opening, making her off guard. Also, if he's at range or if he's in melee, he can create a diversion, say something distracting or point which way. It's not easy to pull off multiple times, however. Hiding and sneaking were skills. Feinting and creating a diversion were also skills using his charisma. Abserd's many talents are becoming useful. Also with his charisma, he can try to demoralize the ogre warrior and say something frightening. They don't share a language, however, so -4 penalty, but he has intimidating glare. He just needs to look at her and has a good chance of making her frightened. So I'll put a list up on the screen of all of the things Abserd can do at level 1. So where are we at with Abserd at level 1? There is no question that he is a rogue. He has been tumbling around the battlefield, skirmishing, going in and out, using his skills, positioning, distracting foes, tumbling through them to open up opportunities to get those nasty crits. He is a roguey rogue. And this was all at level 1, using the base rules only. Again, the free archetype rule variant only kicks in at level 2. All right, let's move on to level 2. First, I'll explain what happens at every level up. You gain hit points, and as a rogue, he gets 8 hit points every level. He doesn't roll any dice, he just gets all 8. And all of his stats that he is trained or expert in, he goes up by 1. All of his attacks, his armor class as well. Even levels are almost always the same. You get a class feat and a skill feat. However, you usually don't get a skill increase. Everyone else needs to wait until level 3 to get one of those, and then they get one every other level after that. He gets a skill increase starting at level 2 and every level after that. And he will get a free archetype feat. But with his bonus skill increase, he's going to boost his stealth skill to expert. He's going to be an expert at skulking in the shadows. He can roll that for initiative. His bonus has gone up from +7 to +10. Also, as an expert, the party can follow his lead, something called follow the leader, in exploration mode. Even if they're untrained, they can add their level, and regardless, they get to add a +2 circumstance bonus to their stealth checks when doing so. For his skill feat, he is going to choose Quiet Allies. When the group is avoiding notice together, they don't need to each make a roll. They only need to make a single roll for the person with the lowest bonus. Abserd can now lead stealth ops and infiltrations. For his class feat, he is going to choose Twin Feint. Because he's dual wielding, this is a good idea for him. He spends 2 actions and makes an attack with each weapon, and no matter what happens with the first attack, the foe will always be off guard to the second attack. Remember, a lot of the ways he can make someone off guard only last for 1 attack. For his free archetype feat, he is going to take Wizard Dedication. This is our first quote-unquote multi-class. He needs an intelligence of +2, which he has, in order to take this feat, and be level 2, obviously. He gets the Cast a Spell activity, and he becomes trained in spellcasting. For wizard spells, he uses his intelligence bonus. He also gets a spell book that has 4 arcane cantrips, and every day he can prepare 2 of those cantrips, which he can cast an unlimited number of times that day. He also gets trained in a skill, Arcana. He already has Arcana, so he gets a free skill here. He's going to become trained in Occultism. He now has 14 skills he is trained in, and he's expert in one of them. Notably, the Dedication feat does not give him everything that a wizard gets at first level. You only get what is spelled out in the feat itself. Now, a level 1 wizard would be getting a lot more. They would be getting a spellbook that has 10 arcane cantrips and 6 first rank spells. They would have first rank spell slots and be able to prepare 5 cantrips a day. They would have an arcane thesis, which is the wizard subclass that gives you a special ability. And they'd have an arcane school, which gives them a bonus spell slot per rank and a rechargeable focus spell that they can cast repeatedly throughout the day. And Arcane Bond, a magically bonded item that lets the wizard recast a spent spell once per day. Abserd gets none of that, and we will see as Abserd levels up how he will advance his skill in the wizardry arts. For his gear, he will have 50 gold. For people wondering, I am giving him the average of level 2 wealth and level 3 wealth for a new character, so this reflects where he is midway through level 2. He's going to get a +1 rapier, a magical weapon. That takes up most of his budget, and with what little that remains, he is going to get a consumable item. As a wizard, he can use any scroll with an arcane spell on it. Arcane is one of the 4 magical traditions, but he is going to get a scroll of Sure Strike, formerly known as True Strike. Scrolls are only 4 gold each. So let's do another battle. Since the party became level 2, Abserd has advanced in status and become the gang's leader. Being a level 2 rogue now, he spots an ogre up ahead and tells the party, "Be quiet, follow my lead, and let's sneak up ahead." So, whereas before they had to each roll stealth, they only need to have one of them roll stealth now, and they get a bunch of bonuses. They get to add their level even if they're not trained. So this is much more likely to succeed, and it succeeds. They're unnoticed by the ogre, all while Abserd is searching for traps. The party springs their ambush, and they all roll initiative. Abserd now has a bonus to initiative of +12 because his stealth is now expert and he benefits from cover. Abserd is first, but decides to act after the fighter, so he delays. The fighter is going to run up, make an attack on that ogre. He hits, and he's going to back up and retreat. The cleric had a much higher stealth bonus this time, so she's actually in front of the ogre in initiative. She's going to move here and shoot Fire Ray, which is a 60-foot range spell. Does she hit the ogre? Yes, she does. There's a very cool animation as she does about 7 damage. The ogre runs up with a battle cry, ogre hook in hand, and attacks. Gonna hit and try to hit a second time. And that misses. Because the ogre has acted already, Abserd needs to make the ogre off guard to him. So he's going to go up, tumble through, he succeeds, and now it is off guard to him. He can now do his new Twin Feint feat, but he's going to play it a little safer this turn because that would use up all of the rest of his actions. He's going to make a single strike with his rapier, and he has a +9 to hit instead of a +7 because of his level up, and he has a magic weapon. That's 1 short of a crit. I'll put some math up on the screen, by the way, to show his DPR has gone up significantly just from since level 1. That's 12 damage to the Ogre Warrior thanks to Sneak Attack. And for his next action, he can do the whole variety of things we saw he could do before, but he can now do a new thing, which is to cast a spell. He's going to cast a Shield Cantrip. It increases his armor class by 1, and also gives him a reaction. If the Ogre hits him and deals damage, he could lower the damage by 5. That gives him some protection so he can stand there to set up his next turn. Note that he can dual wield, he doesn't need a free hand, while casting spells. That is something in Pathfinder 2e that is now much truer in the remaster. Nearly every spell in the game does not require a free hand. Next is the Hunting Spider, which is going to go down from the ceiling, run up, and attack the fighter. It hits. Next is the wizard. He's going to walk up and cast Breathe Fire, formerly known as Burning Hands. He's going to stand at the safe spot and then target our enemies. That's going to do 9 damage, and they get to do reflex saves. And the ogre fails while the spider succeeds. The fighter is going to wait for the cleric to act first. The cleric is going to cast the Bless spell. In a 15-foot radius, all of her allies will get a +1 bonus to attacks and to fear saving throws. She also tries to demoralize the ogre by saying something holy, but the ogre doesn't care. She's not able to use her glare the way Abserd does. The fighter's now going to get into a flanking position, now buffed by this bless spell, and now has a godly +12 to attack, just a regular hit. He makes another strike and it misses. Level 1 fight was a severe encounter, and here it is a moderate encounter, just above a moderate encounter, just a tad. Next is the Ogre Warrior, who's going to attack Abserd. And this is a crit against Abserd, no! And the Ogre Hook is a deadly weapon. That's 27 damage against Abserd. That would knock him out, except that he has a shield spell, so he reduces that to 22 damage using his reaction. He waxes off that gigantic weapon. He cannot cast shield again for 10 minutes, but this turn is not over. Here comes the Ogre Warrior again. Whew, that misses. And there's another miss. So next is Abserd. Well, he has some options. He can do Twin Feint right now. They have to be against the same enemy, however. He could try to tumble behind using his feet to make one of them off guard and then make 2 attacks that might inflict sneak attack damage. However, he wants to play with his new toys that he learned in wizardry school, so he's going to do something else. He is going to try to first attack the Ogre Warrior. That misses, unfortunately, but his new spell his other spell that he knows is Electric Arc. He's gonna do a Palpatine on them. He extends out his hands to both enemies and can attack both of them with a single cantrip. 2d4 electricity damage, and they have to do basic reflex saves. They can take as little as 0 damage or as much as double damage, depending on which of the 4 degrees of success they land on. So they're going to now save against it. They both make their reflex saves, however, and each take 2 damage. One thing to say is that if he had made a second weapon attack, it would have suffered from the multiple attack penalty. And being a Palpatine, casting the spell that called for a saving throw, did not have an attack roll, meant that it does not suffer from the multiple attack penalty. He basically got to do 2 attacks at full accuracy with this combining weapon fighting and casting spells. It's a good option when you face weaker foes or foes at low health, and it's also good, especially if you know a foe has poor reflexes. The Hunting Spider is next, and it's gonna go for the fighter. It lands a critical hit, and he fails his saving throw as well. It bites again, and that is gonna knock him out. With its last action, it goes for Abserd, but misses. With this shocking turn of events, the spellcasters, which now includes Abserd, look at each other and decide it's going down. They're gonna bring out all of their other spells. The wizard casts Force Barrage, but spreads its missiles between the Hunting Spider and the Ogre Warrior. This kills the spider and wounds the Ogre Warrior further. The cleric heals the fighter and walks up to be in position to give more healing if necessary. The fighter stands up and walks around the ogre to set up a flank. Tries to hit the ogre with his shield, and that misses. The Ogre Warrior, seeing that, it's gonna go after the fighter. 11 damage, he uses his reactive shield feat in the meantime. He's down to 1 hit point, and the ogre misses. Abserd is next. The first thing he does is swap items. With 1 action, he's gonna put his dagger away and bring out his Scroll of Sure Strike. With action 2, he's gonna cast Sure Strike, which takes 1 action. And with his 3rd action, he's gonna attack the Ogre Warrior. He now gets to roll the attack twice and use the better roll. It's what D&D players know as advantage. Also, if the ogre were invisible or in fog right now, he gets to ignore that penalty. Because the ogre's flanked, it's off guard, so he has a 44% chance to critically hit the ogre right now. But the cleric's bless spell makes that a 51% chance. So let's see what happens. This is take 1. It's a crit. That is going to probably kill the ogre. And it does, 28 damage. Afterward, they look through the ogre's things and find a note from a commander. Apparently, this ogre was just one of an army of ogres that are commanded by frost giants that will be threatening the realm. It looks like there are greater dangers ahead for our party. For this and the previous fight, I planned what happened, including the dice rolls to show what I wanted to show. But if you're interested in a unplanned fight where I let the dice fall where they may, I do play out the level 1 fight and the level 2 fight on my Patreon. If you support that, you can see them. So where are we at after 2 levels? From our questions earlier, are you able to make Abserd and is it still viable? And if yes, does that mean your choices are meaningless? Do we know more to answer these questions? So are the choices that Abserd had before balanced between single classing, you could call it, or multi-classing? Well, thankfully, because of the free archetype variant, we have direct evidence. Now we can ask ourselves, if he did not have free archetype and had to choose between either Twin Feint or Wizard Dedication feat, how would he fare? Remember, I only did free archetype for this series in order to get as many multi-classes as possible. We get to do a head-to-head. With the Wizard Dedication feat, he got an additional skill that he did not get if he had taken Twin Feint. Besides that, he had more actions that he could do on his turn. They're all competing for his 3 actions. He didn't gain more actions per turn. And for Twin Feint, that costs 2 actions to use. Remember, this is the feat. You spend 2 actions to make 1 attack with each weapon in each of your hands, and the enemy is off guard to the second attack. So if he only took Twin Feint and not the Wizard feat, he would be able to more reliably make an enemy off guard, tumble behind an enemy, and then make 2 attacks with an off guard enemy. However, the, marginal benefit is smaller than it sounds because there are other ways to make an enemy off guard, as we know. You can flank an enemy and make multiple attacks more likely to hit. Also, it makes the enemy off guard to the second, less accurate attack. And of course, it requires committing 2 actions. The enemy might die before your second attack, and it being 2 actions means you have less freedom to move around the battlefield and do other things. If he had instead only taken the Wizard Dedication feat, he would have cantrips that increase his options in combat. Things that are outside of weapon fighting, but have their own use cases. And also, if he decides to free up his hand to do this, he can take out a scroll and access even more spells, and he can prepare different cantrips on different days and find more cantrips to add to his spellbook. It opens up more options. And also unlocks more Wizard Archetype feats if he decides to choose those to get more spellcasting abilities. Now, neither feat was necessarily better than the other. However, we do see that it does have a big effect on what options you have in combat. And this answers the second question, does the fact that things are more balanced here make your choices meaningless? And I think it's pretty clear the answer is no. Also, regardless of which of these 2 feats he would have taken, his advancement as a rogue continues. He is still more roguey. All of his stats, including his attacks and all of the skills he used in combat, have increased by 1. Because he's the best at skills as a rogue, he gets that extra skill increase. He was able to become expert in stealth, get a feat that helps his allies, and his better skills also make it easier to debuff enemies and set up those juicy crits. He can now lead an ambush or lead his party through an enemy's stronghold. And his improved skills makes it easier for him to do those things that debuff enemies and set up those juicy crits. Now, I'll make a comment here that his advancement in Rogue is much greater than what he is getting from the Wizard class. You're not going to be able to take an even amount of 2 classes in Pathfinder 2e unless you use an official variant rule called dual class PCs. That, on the other hand, increases the power of all characters. All players at your table and your GM will need to be on board. Now back to Abserd. No matter which of those 2 feats he took, his bread and butter rapier attack would have the same stats, and the other class feats that he could have taken would not have changed this either. Detractors of Pathfinder 2e will say, well, that means your choices don't matter. But I think I've shown that they do matter. Let's look at a few examples. Basically, they don't give you straight up math advantages that make them clearly better than competing choices. So here's a few class feats that he could have taken in lieu of Twin Feint. Nimble Dodge, he uses his reaction to get +2 bonus to an incoming attack. Nor next, a reaction when he knocks an enemy down to 0 hit points, he can try to demoralize somebody else within 60 feet, but with a bonus. That's a cool feat. And Unbalancing Blow. If he critically hits against a foe, the target is off guard against him until the end of his next turn. Now, Nimble Dodge only works sometimes. Your Next, the occasion for it only comes up sometimes. Unbalancing Blow arguably looks like the strongest of these. However, it needs a critical hit to trigger. And if your party can provide you a flanking buddy anyway, this has less marginal benefit. So what your class feats do as the rogue, they don't improve your basic math, they give you ways to leverage different situations. So it's not a huge loss to forego a rogue class feat. Whereas in other systems, there are some clear choices that make you much more effective, do more damage. It's often said that in other systems you can win at character creation. But in Pathfinder 2e, arguably, and I think I've shown, when you make your character and advance it, level it up, your choices only begin. So that's it for now. So what will happen with Abserd when he advances in his wizardry studies and unlocks forbidden secrets and gets kicked out of wizardry school and has a religious awakening? If there's sufficient interest, and leave a comment and also give some feedback too on things I could do better, then I will do another part and level him up. I already have it planned, but there's a lot of work involved in prepping the PowerPoint and doing combat demonstrations, etc. So I need to know if it's worth it. So let me know. I promise that the other videos will go faster through the levels. We have to establish some foundational things here, and I will not do a combat demo for every level. I will not do that. If you haven't yet, support my Patreon, where you get to see the character sheets for Abserd, level 1 and level 2, bonus content where I play out the level 1 and level 2 fights without scripting anything, and I let the dice fall where they may, and also my planning document that I made at the start of this year for my original plan for this video series that already goes up to level 20, but makes some points that I think I've made in other videos since, and so I'm actually paring back on that initial plan. It's not fully fleshed out, and in fact, I hope people on the Patreon can give me feedback, corrections, suggestions that will improve the final product. Of course, there are other exclusive videos on my Patreon, including me running Pathfinder for D&D YouTubers. Also check out my 2-part series on character creation and why multiclassing had to die in Pathfinder 2e. Also, join my Discord where we talk Pathfinder 2e and other gaming, and you can also play Pathfinder 2e with the drop-in organized play system that we have. So that's it. I have been Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I'll see you next time.